Just while we're waiting for the folks that are in, there's going to be a Q&A box at the bottom on your Zoom app there as well. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to poke them in there. Rob, who's beside me, above me, or below me, depending on how your screen's set up, he'll be at hand to answer your questions. And if there's any interesting ones, which I'm sure there will be, we'll leave those for the end as well to discuss them. The format of today, we're going to be touching upon, we're going to get a Koyfin hat, Daniel asks. That's funny. Merch coming soon. The format of today is going to be, we're going to go over my portfolio, which is the latest feature that we've just released. I'm sure some of you have already seen the video we put out on YouTube and some of the documentation, but a few of you won't have seen this before, so we're going to walk through that. And then we're going to talk about some of the little delight features that we added to my portfolio that we're kind of proud of. And then we also want to talk about the development and the future roadmap for my portfolio as well. I like to think that with this kind of feature, we've set a really nice foundation, but we have a lot of ambitions in this space. So we want to talk about some of that as well. And then we'll also have some time for some Q&A at the end. Cool. It looks like we have a good quorum here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And then for folks that roll in, for folks that joined after I started babbling, we have a Q&A box down at the bottom. Feel free to punch in questions there, and we'll get started. Cool. So what we see in front of me is a blank My Portfolio screen. I'm going to just highlight a couple of things first. We do have a video over on YouTube. If this goes too quickly for you today, we have a video over on YouTube announcing the feature as well. We also have some documentation in our release notes where we kind of break down some things that we'll be discussing today as well. And then if you have used my portfolio or you plan to use it after this, the Koyfin feedback board, we have a dedicated one for my portfolio. It's been super active since we launched this. And we're going to be basing a lot of the roadmap on the suggestions of users. We always do that. You can come in here, you can upvote things, comment things. I personally have been monitoring this several times a day, so I'll get back to you on the same day and give you some kind of context as per your question and tell you if we're planning to do it or not. So with that out of the way, first things first, the kind of context of my portfolio, the difference between a model portfolio and a my portfolio, you can think of as paper versus real money. They're different workflows. One is more focused on kind of simulation. The other one is focused on, lots and transactions. And the thing we wanted to achieve with the first version of my portfolio was have a really solid foundation in tracking a current portfolio. So we knew already when we built this, people would ask for, certain features, which we're planning to build, and we'll touch on that as well. But without further ado, we have a new side icon here for my portfolio. You jump in here, you'll be able to watch a demo, which will take you over to the YouTube demonstration, or we can create one here. I can see one anonymous attendee question there in the corner of my eye asking about creating more than one portfolio. There's a few ways to conceptualize this, so I'll go over the kind of flow now. It might answer your question, but right now we have one portfolio and we have plans to have several portfolios. So what I did there, I just went create portfolio, and we have this new dialog box. Some of the things that we introduced to my portfolio that we didn't have previously in Koyfin include lot level transactions, FX adjusted profit and loss, and returns and total returns. So we need a new dialog to handle all of that. So I'm based in the UK, and the first thing I'm going to do here is change my portfolio currency to pounds, because I want things to be reflected in pounds, like my cash balance. And if I'm buying US stocks, I want those to be converted to pounds. There's a few ways we can add to this creation flow here. Number one, we can do things manually. This is a current portfolio tracker. So if you don't have, hundreds or tens of positions in your portfolio, it might be a good idea to do that if you want to. We can click the add ticker button here. We can select our security or search for it. We have NVIDIA here. Let's just say I've got 50 shares. I paid 125 bucks for those shares. And I don't know if this is accurate or not. I don't follow NVIDIA, but we bought that 2 years ago. Now, previously you could do this in a watch list, but what you can do now in Koyfin is add lots. So you can see here on the right-hand side, I have the ability to add as many lots as you want. And we aggregate those when you create the portfolio and give you lot level P&L data as well as the aggregate. And where it gets really fun is you can separate this out between different accounts as well. I'll quickly show you how we do that. I'll show you the other accounts as well in just a second, but The concept of a portfolio, one portfolio, you can think of that as the aggregate. The accounts, you can conceptualize this in kind of whatever way you want. But an easier way might be to think about them as brokerages. So here I have my retirement account. I might make this one my tax shielded ISA, which is a UK product. I might have a 401k. I might have a more active account versus a dividend account, those kinds of things. But if you don't want to plug all of these in by hand, you can also upload a CSV, which is what we're going to do today, just to save some time. So I'm going to upload a CSV and walk through this. You can see here, the maximum is 200 securities for now. We plan to increase that. It's just a performance-related issue. For now, we want the performance to be solid. We give you an example of a CSV that you can download. If you click that, it will download. I already have one prepared, so I'm going to go ahead and drop one in. So let's search for it. So this one. So here's just an example of a CSV. You can see here that we have the same item, Kura Sushi, here multiple times. This is going to assume that we mean lots, which we do. So you can upload lots in here as well. Just a few tickers in there. This looks good, so we're going to go next. At this point, you want to ensure that the Koyfin template fields match the ones in your CSV. They don't have to have the same name, but you just want to match the data up. So cost, this might be cost per share or something. In your CSV, just make sure all of these match. Then we'll go next. Another verification just to check everything's good here. If you had a purchase date missing, for example, or purchase date the wrong way around, might flag something here. The only mandatory items that we require are the ticker and the quantity. The cost and purchase date are optional, but they will give you more data output, things like total returns and P&L and stuff like that. So this is the last validation, pretty useful page. If, for example, you had, I don't know, a UK traded version of PayPal and you wanted to change that, you could come in here and make that change. But this all looks good to me. So what I'm going to do is import that. And we've now populated the account field, and we can go ahead and create that portfolio. And we're going to generate a bunch of data for you. It's more interesting when we're looking at this with two accounts, however. So I'm going to quickly add a second account, and we'll just call this one dividend, because I can't think of anything else. We'll call this one dividends. So it has £500 in it, and we'll just upload a second CSV here. So similar process, this just has different securities in it. Some of them are the same as that I had in the retirement account. I won't bore you by going over everything twice, so we'll just go through this and upload the CSV. Cool, so this is LPE. Sometimes it assumes it's the US one, it's the French one, that's good. MC, I want the French version, so I'm going to quickly change that. Everything else looks good. We will import this one. I can see a question to the right-hand side. The CSV upload doesn't account for sales just now. With the version 1 of my portfolio, you can think of as tracking a current portfolio, so only the things that you currently own. Sales are in the roadmap. Historic transactions, it's just a bigger project, but we'll talk more about that briefly. Just a lot of people ask this as well. If you want to record a sell or a trim, right now the logic would be that you either edit that lot or remove that lot. In the future, we plan to have sales in there, so it'll be a bit more intuitive. But populated this second account here, and I'm going to go ahead and save that one. And then we can walk through some of the exhibits that we show here. So focusing on the profit and loss page, this is going to be the place where you look at the profit and loss. You have FX adjusted returns, and it's really going to be the lot level kind of focus for the portfolio. So this is just everything in one screen here, and I'll talk about some of the things that we've got going on. Up here on the right-hand side, if you ever want to get back to that dialog box, you have Edit Portfolio, which you can access at any time. You have the Watch List News feature, which has been, transformed into Portfolio News because it's a great feature. Here you can create a tailored newsfeed based on all the constituents of your portfolio: filings, news, transcripts, and press releases. Up here you have a quote box. This little gear icon will allow you to change the data that we show in this quote box, or you can drag them around as well. And up here is your portfolio market value and your portfolio currency. And you've got the one-day change here as well, ticking away live. So everything in here, we'll talk to some of the new things. So The column selection you have in here, we're going to go over grouping and download as well. But the most important thing, I think even long before I joined Koyfin, I always knew that people were asking Koyfin for lots. We have those now. So you can access these lots by touching these little chevrons here, or you can use this button to open and collapse them. And you can see here that, do we have any examples? Yeah, so we've got LSEG, London Stock Exchange Group here. We're showing you the aggregate position, and then we're also breaking it down by account as well. So I've got this dividend account and this retirement account here as well. And then if we scroll over to the right here, a lot of these new data series, there we go. A lot of these new data series that we built specifically for my portfolio, I'm really proud of them. Being an international investor myself, I like to see the FX impact of all of my positions. So what I'm going to do is come into portfolio tools here and just show them off. So we've got profit and loss. We've got the P&L from FX, which shows you the impact. And then we've got the excluding FX as well. So I'm going to add all of these just so we can give you the context and arrange them in the correct way. So we've got profit and loss excluding FX percentage over here. There we go. So in order, the way to think about this, bearing in mind I have a UK portfolio, so it's based in pounds. This profit and loss here is going to be, I guess you could call it your security level profit and loss. So it's before the impact of FX over time. It is showing you that in a pound notional. So this is £66,000 profit from this Chipotle trade. And we can see that's 66% return. However, the relationship between the pound and the dollar since I bought this position has obviously changed somewhat. So there will be an impact when I come to actually sell that position. So this P&L from FX is showing you that impact both notionally and as a percentage. And then the P&L here is going to be kind of your net P&L or your true P&L, excluding costs. And we can see there's a difference here. So £66,000 for Chipotle, about 4,000 lost from the FX impact over time, 62,000 net P&L. And then we have total return here as well. In the case of Chipotle, you can see that it's identical to P&L. There's some similarity in the calculation, but the biggest point to note here is that Chipotle has never paid a dividend, so the percentages are expected to be the same. If we come down to a position, let me collapse these lots, like Greg's here, for example, a UK favorite, you can see that the P&L percentage is 52% and the total return is 55%. So total return is actually a new feature or a new data set in Koyfin as well that people have been asking about. So now we show you that with the influence of dividends. And you can see here with Greg's, because this is a pound-based portfolio, there is no FX impact because it's a domestic asset that I'm buying. So yeah, some of these new features here, and we outline those in the documentation that I shared as well, but we're happy to introduce those. Some interesting things you can do here when you have multiple accounts. If we go to the grouping function, you can group these by account. So it's kind of we call it like an accordion in Koyfin. So like this accordion effect of having the parent and the lots underneath it. There's actually kind of like a double or triple accordion effect going on here. You have the dividend group, you have the account grouping, you then have the parent level security, but then you also have the ability to show the same security in twice inside of a table, which was something that didn't actually exist in Koyfin previously. A lot of the feedback we got from watchlist is people wanted to do this in a watchlist, but it wasn't kind of built that way. So let's see if we have something that's in both of these. LSEG, you can see up here in the dividend account, and then we've also got it down here in retirement. And you can, if you had lots on those, you could break them out by lots as well. So loads of ways to kind of break down the portfolios. And if I was to add a summary row here as well, one like sum, for example, we would then be able to see the market value at any point in time in each of these accounts. Just a small tip I don't think many Koyfin users know about. If you do have a summary row, if you right click in the cell, you're able to hide those. Something like the sum of the quantity of shares I have is, in my opinion, not useful information. So you can hide that if you right click, the sum of average cost, and so on. You can hide these fields, but you also have a bunch of other options here like portfolio weighted averages, percentiles, and ranges. All of this data you can download as well if you want. And the column selection you have in profit and loss is largely focused on these portfolio level insights. as well as the security level information and the asset specific information of the companies in the portfolio. Right now, we do have custom formulas. We plan to introduce the rest of the kind of custom data set, like labels and text boxes. So in the future, you could add tags to each of these positions and custom group them, and break them down with these kind of groupings and some summary rows like that as well. The exposure tab. We had to build a new pie for this. I really like it. I really like this pie. So the exposure tab is going to be where you break down all of the exposures in the portfolio. So right now we have sectoral, security, industry, asset class, and country. You'll see that we break down this in the pie, and you can hover over all of these different elements. And on the right-hand side, we have that broken down in the table as well. We have a lot of plans of exposure. If any of you have used the model portfolio exposure exhibits, you know that they're really nice as well. There's a lot of stuff that we will eventually be borrowing from model portfolios aesthetically in terms of kind of functionality and then also in the UI. So more exposure exhibits coming. One in particular that we've planned and we're kind of getting ready to build is kind of breaking this down by account. So right now in exposure, you see everything, but it's kind of aggregated. So I have two accounts here. This is showing me the aggregate of those two accounts. We want to allow you to basically just filter down on a specific account. So if I want to see all of these views, but just for my retirement account, and then flip over and look at the same thing for my dividend account, be able to do that soon. So exposure, lots of work coming here, but a really nice job in V1. And then analysis as well. So analysis is probably going to be the most familiar page to a regular Koyfin user. It behaves, or it looks, I should say, a lot like a watch list, but it's not a watch list, but it has a lot of the same functionality. Here you have the full spectrum of columns available, so you can really get deeper into the kind of fundamental or valuation-centric analysis of all the portfolio holdings. This will just automatically populate all of your portfolio holdings and will be based on kind of the positions you hold today. If you've spent time building views inside of watch lists, don't worry. While the concept of views exists in the analysis page, you can import views from watch list tables as well. So go into the view section there and then import table views. We have this amazing test watch list, and I created a view and its multiples. I can go ahead and just kind of seamlessly import that into this table. One thing to note here, these kind of views don't speak to each other, if you will. So if I make a change in this view, it won't change the watch list view. So they're interdependent. You can copy them over any time, but they don't kind of communicate with each other after the point that you've imported it. We can speak to that logic if anyone has questions about that as well. But this will be where you kind of focus all your fundamental research, and you have your reported currencies, and you can change things there as well. We have a few questions here. I might just answer a couple of them before we talk about roadmap, just for fun. David asks, will you eventually do total portfolio analytics inclusive of cash holdings? So cash, I can speak to cash and talk a bit about that. So let me just click answer live. Okay. Yeah, so cash right now as it exists, I guess what's the best way to say it? So cash previously in Koyfin was interesting because with securities, you have kind of pricing information and historic information. To kind of put cash into my portfolio, we had to kind of almost like create it as an asset, if it were. So we have a lot more work to do there. Right now, cash is represented up here in the cash balance and the weighting. In the exposure exhibits right now, the cash isn't kind of influenced at all in here. I've already kind of scoped out how we can add that. So we plan to add cash into these exhibits and have more of a kind of a contextual analysis on, cash flows over time, and more cash analysis generally with kind of different currency cash accounts as well. A good point to make here, I know I've said it a few times, but this version of my portfolio, like the foundation, is very much focused on a current portfolio. The next thing that we want to build in here, which is kind of its own project, is adding a time series element to all of this information. So that includes performance, historic transactions, like risk analytics, cash flows. We just couldn't build all of that in one go. It would just be too big of a project, and we really wanted to lay down a foundation first. Lou Whitman asks, is there any way to reinvest dividends other than to manually enter it as a new lot or edit the first lot every 3 months? So just to show what Lou's alluding to here, if I had Chipotle and it paid a dividend and it paid me one today, Koyfin right now in my portfolio doesn't automatically kind of account for that. So you'd have to come into your portfolio, you would go to Chipotle, which I think is in this account, and then you would either create a lot to represent that fractional share of dividend or whatever it might be, or you would edit an existing lot to kind of update the quantity and the rest of the information. That kind of works for now, but V1 was not like kind of purpose built to be able to handle that or support it. So the way to answer your question, Lou, is there's not a great way to do that today in my portfolio, but that's something top of mind as we think about adding this time series element to my portfolio. How do we kind of account for dividends, stock splits, all of this stuff? A lot of the answer to these questions is the kind of concept of a transaction, where you can kind of tell Koyfin, hey, this transaction happened, whether it's a fee or an interest income or a dividend, and it kind of just registers, and then some magic happens on the back end and you see it all nicely presented to you in analytics and user interface.
Hey, Connor, can you also maybe go over how to interpret total return versus change and how that would incorporate dividends into the P&L?
Yeah, when you say change, what do you mean?
So we have like in the screen that you're looking at, we have a way to capture any dividends paid in terms of like your positions in your total return. So just explain kind of maybe how dividends factor into the P&L or the total return calculation.
Sure. Yeah. So the P&L, we already found kind of the differences between the FX components of profit and loss. One of the assumptions that we make in profit and total return, which I think is important, if I buy 100 shares of Microsoft and I'm based in the US and there's no FX component to it, total return will assume that every dividend has been reinvested. So it factors in all of those dividends into the price. Our version of total return as well also includes the FX component if there is one. And then price return alternatively will assume kind of no impact from dividends. So if you've owned that Microsoft position for say 10 years, the difference between the price return and the total return might be, I don't know, just making a guess here, anywhere from like 5, 15, 20%. However, it's likely your true return, because it's unlikely you invested every single one of those dividends unless you have reinvestment turned on. It's likely your true return is somewhere between the two. So just something to consider there. But now having both of those kind of data sets just gives you more context. If you do have dividend reinvestments turned on, then you're going to be closer to that kind of total return percentage there. And just another note, the total return I mentioned includes the impact of FX over time, which for many of you isn't a big consideration if you're in the US, investing in the US. But we plan to also introduce a total return metric that excludes the impact of FX as well, just for additional context. I'm going to quickly speak about the roadmap, and then I'll just jump into a bunch of these questions as well, because there's some really good ones in here. So the roadmap, I mentioned, V1 is very much current focused. We've set that foundation, and V2 and beyond, or just the roadmap of this feature in general, is going to be adding more of a time series element to it. And we've incorporated a lot of the feedback that many of you have shared in the feedback channel already. So I've separated this out between next and later. Next is more kind of near term things we've already ideated and we're going to start working on or have started working on right now. Later is stuff we have ideated, but it's probably bigger and it maybe requires some kind of other things to be built first, and things like that. So coming soon, the concept of benchmarking, we plan to introduce that just generally across the portfolio. And that will filter into things like exposure exhibits. So you can see those against the benchmark. That'll also kind of work alongside performance so that you can track performance against the benchmark. X-ray fund exposure. I'm going to just quickly show you what that is in case anybody doesn't know. So we're going to come into model portfolios and we're going to create a new one and we're going to call it 100% SPY. And we're just going to add 100% SPY to it. So we have this logic today in model portfolios. So we're going to add it to my portfolios is basically the component of the roadmap that I'm referring to here. So we have 100% SPY in here. And in this exposure exhibit, for example, we're not just showing you that you're 100% exposed to SPY. We're actually taking out all of the information from the fund and breaking that down for you. So if you own SPY, you'll be able to see all the sectoral influence of that. And when you kind of flick through different exposure exhibits, you'll be able to see which sector and what percentage, what the contribution is, what the exposure is, and stuff like that. So that doesn't exist today in my portfolios, but we plan to introduce that pretty soon. Custom labels and grouping. So anyone that's used to watch this before will know that we have kind of custom labels, text boxes, date boxes. The custom labels particularly are really useful in a portfolio setting because we do give you a bunch of grouping options, but if you want to group things in a personalized way, I don't know, things you plan to sell versus things you plan to hold or some other kind of personal thing, you'll be able to add labels to those positions at the parent level or the lot level, and you'll be able to group by those as well. So just to kind of create your own custom views. Excuse me. Performance. So performance is kind of two-pronged. And there's two ways that we're thinking about it. So there's two different workflows here. So in one workflow, you would want to have kind of your historic buys and sells, and you would want those to be reflected as performance, something closer to maybe what a brokerage would show you. But then there's also another use case where you can simulate performance based on the current portfolio you have today. So if you have 100 shares in Meta, 50 in Microsoft XYZ, and you want to see kind of risk metrics based on that current portfolio, or you want to see how that portfolio would have performed during the pandemic, or kind of run these kinds of simulations. We also plan to introduce that kind of performance as well. They'll probably be in separate kind of areas. There'll be separate workflows, but both really useful. And we'll be sure to kind of document the differences between those two as well. So simulated performance based on current holdings, that's more near term. Candidly, we already understand how to do that and we've built that. There's a lot more kind of thought that needs to go into historic transactions. We've been doing a lot of work there, but we really want to nail it. So performance simulated coming pretty soon. Portfolio statistics. So in the summary page today, if I go into my portfolio, the analysis page, I should say, if I come into the analysis page and here's all my portfolio holdings, and I want to add the weight here, and I also want to add a summary row and show portfolio weighted average for all these multiples. You can see that. It's there, but we want to kind of introduce functionality that kind of puts that a bit more front and center, whether that's like a dedicated tab or giving you that context in the quote box. Statistics page is something we've kind of thought about just to give you a high level overview of, hey, what's the kind of harmonic, mean PE of this portfolio relative to a benchmark. So more statistics there. Account level exposures. So that's something I mentioned earlier on. So when we come into exposure right now, everything is aggregated. In the near future, we're going to have some kind of filtering capability in there so that you can break this out just to look at individual accounts as opposed to the portfolio. Risk metrics, something people want to know. They want to know Sharps, they want to know beta, correlation, all this kind of stuff. So risk metrics is something we have some really great features for our model portfolios. We're going to bring them into my portfolios as well. Short exposure. So this doesn't exist in Koyfin today, period. And there's a lot of ways we can do it. We're going to start off by kind of allowing someone to kind of represent direct short exposure in securities. As far as kind of levered shorts or derivative-based shorts, that's something we don't support in Koyfin today. So we'd have to support that first, and then we can kind of mesh that in with short exposure. But the TLDR is we plan to support short exposure in the near term. And a few later items as well, custom assets. So if we don't support something in Koyfin, like maybe it's art or something that doesn't really have a public liquid market, real estate, for example, is maybe a bit less liquid, and you might want to represent that in a portfolio. Having some kind of way that you can add these values and kind of assign what it is, whether it's like real estate, art, an antique, something like that, or even a bond, some kind of way of having a custom asset that in your portfolio so it can be represented. historic transactions, buys and sells. And then this also just kind of ties in with historical P&L and performance. So we appreciate that like so many people have been asking us about this. We're super focused on building it. It's probably one of the most important things we're going to be building this year for my portfolio. So yeah, we plan to introduce historic transactions and then have a bunch of great analytics based off that as well. So that will include the sales as well. Broker integration, this is probably like later plus one, but broker integration is something that we have kind of been scoping out internally, and we plan to introduce to Koyfin broadly, but more specifically with my portfolio. And then the concept of multiple portfolios as well. I think someone asked about um, I'll be candid and say we could do this pretty soon, but I think there's a kind of a UI change that we could make before doing that would just make it so much more seamless. So we probably want to make that change to kind of accommodate having multiple portfolios more readily, because the kind of the breadth of use cases for having multiple portfolios is quite wide. For some individuals, you might want to have maybe 5 or 10 portfolios to represent different themes, or just kind of dummy portfolios or whatever it might be. If you're an advisor or an institution, you might want thousands of portfolios. So we need to think of a solution that kind of caters to everyone's needs. But yeah, multiple portfolios, we'll have those as well.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey, Connor. I wanted to see if we could kind of like launch a poll about the performance and how folks value the performance about looking at transactions versus simulated performance. So I created a poll with 2 questions. I'm going to launch it right now. Basically asking, there's kind of 2 ways to look at performance. One is to look at the actual portfolio over time, including the transactions. So kind of seeing your true P&L over time and being able to track that as a graph and compare it versus a benchmark. The other way would be to look at the performance of the current holdings and seeing how that performed over time. So that would be useful if you wanted to compare it during different periods, during different episodes, see how the current portfolio has performed over the past couple of years or year to date, whatever it is. And there are different use cases. So just launching that poll now, if you can kind of take the next 20 seconds to vote on it, and we'll tally up the answers and we'll see what people say.
Awesome, cool. I'll just maybe poke for a couple of questions while people are, entering their answers. Yeah, would love to know the results of this poll. We're going to introduce both of these features as well, but just curious to always hear what the users' kind of preferences are. Mario says, is portfolio level performance available looking for 1 day, 1 month, quarter, and 1 year? So the short answer is no, because the focus of my portfolio was just kind of laying that groundwork for the current portfolio. So we do show 1 day change, but based on what you're asking for, like quarterly, performance, we don't have that today, but that's definitely kind of the focus of the next kind of version of my portfolio, and that's what we are focused on. So not today, but we will have that going forward. Rhett asks, plan to add commission cost to each lot. So this is something probably that would come in as we think about historic transactions. So when you're dealing with like a current portfolio versus like things you've sold, you probably don't always want those things you've sold to be kind of front and center in the UI, but you want a place to access them. So we have to think about that workflow. But the short answer is yes, we plan to account for commissions, fees. There's commission definitely is just the most obvious one. There's also a point for FX as well. It varies across the world. If you're in the US and the UK, commissionless trades are pretty common nowadays, but there is still an FX component that will cost you money over time as well. So yeah, the answer is we plan to incorporate fees and commissions into kind of trade level information that you're adding, both kind of manually and CSV. Peter asks, can multiple accounts be aggregated to view as a global portfolio? So there's a few ways to kind of conceptualize this answer. Number one is yes, that's kind of what my portfolio does in this current version. So everything we're looking at, for the most part, is all going to be aggregated. So apart from when you're kind of grouping by account, if I ungroup, this is everything. This market value up here is the whole collective of all of these accounts. All of these exposure exhibits is kind of aggregated. So this Chipotle position might be in one account, this Meta position might be in another account, this is giving me like a collective view of like all of my assets, all in one space. And part of the roadmap that we have is kind of allowing a user to kind of disaggregate that a little bit more within the portfolio itself. There's a few different ways, and I'm sure when we put this in the hands of users as well, they'll use it in different ways. Like in theory, you could create, if we had multiple portfolios, you could create like one separate portfolio for each brokerage that you have. But it's nice to see them kind of aggregated and then disaggregated all in one space. Um, so yeah, you can aggregate multiple accounts. That's kind of the focus of what this version of my portfolio does. The disaggregation is the thing that we kind of have to add, and we'll be doing that pretty soon. Anonymous attendee, can you calculate portfolio returns and compare to relevant benchmarks? So I think we've discussed that one, not right now, but in V2, that's definitely a focus. Faisal, oh, we have the results of the poll. You're viewing the results.
I'm not sure. Sorry, this is the first time we're doing this poll. Okay. You know what? We will have to aggregate them and basically we're going to send a recap email with the webinar recording, and so we'll have kind of the average of each. So thanks for participating in that.
Oh, okay, cool. Cool. We'll just walk through some more of these Q&As. Yeah. Faisal, can you track your ISA and total return and monthly payments if you invest in Vanguard VWRP? So the short answer is, can you track your ISA and total return and monthly payments? I think
I
this is
think
just, yeah.
so. I think this is just income. Can you track your income? And this is something that is definitely in a later version of tracking dividend income. So you can't do that today, but definitely down the line.
Yeah, okay. Faisal, if you're referring to the ISA, apology if the ISA UK product. David asks, when we collapse groups, we can't get the summary lines. So for example, to quickly view weights and performance by industry. Um, I believe we should be able to. So if we group here, go by industry. Oh, when you're saying you're collapsing I know Rob will like this one. Um, it would be nice if the data was kind of on this row here so that when you do collapse things you can see it there. But yeah, that's a good piece of feedback. David, we don't get the summary lines. Yeah, I think it's always great to kind of add these feedbacks to the feedback section of Koyfin as well. Like we'll be actively monitoring these, and if we have a few upvotes there, or we think it's viable, we could implement these as well. So thanks for that, David. Anonymous attendee, are we able to somehow choose how to backfill data to create this hypothetical performance exercise? Right now, no. But when we introduce kind of simulated performance on this hypothetical basis, if you will, based on current performance, and we do plan to have various different ways and assumptions, and we'll kind of put the power in your hands. So whether it's you want to have them equally weighted throughout the entire period, so it's almost like it's rebalancing daily, or you want to like start from the beginning, say I have X shares are the value, and then allow those to kind of grow unweighted and kind of flow up to the allocation that you have today. There'll be a few different ways that you can kind of simulate the performance with the current holdings, is the answer to that question. Hal asks, much of the functionality in your V1 is currently available at custodians like Schwab and Fidelity. Is your long-term plan to develop a product that competes directly with Morningstar, Workstation, Zephyr, LSEG, Advisor Workspace? Yeah, I would say definitely the version one is a foundation. There's so much more that we can build here. I think maybe Rob, if you want to speak to kind of the competitive aspect of that, if we is
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, so I that's a great question. I would say I would echo what Connor said. There's kind of like a foundational element to this, in that we want to be a complete platform. So we need to have kind of portfolio analytics because that's such an important workflow for our users. I would say as we thought about portfolio analytics, there's some things that I think are probably a little bit better, or what we heard from our users were a problem in certain other platforms that we wanted to address. So one thing is kind of like just being able to create these different accounts and being able to aggregate accounts very easily is something that we heard isn't easy to do in other platforms. And so we're going to have a lot of flexibility and a lot of functionality as we introduce analytics to be able to group by certain accounts, look at the overall portfolio, have custom themes and custom labels as well. So that's one thing. The second thing is really integrating the portfolio analytics with the other data that we have on our platform. So, for example, if you're looking at valuation or growth rates, or looking at any sort of performance or financial metrics, we want to have those available in your portfolio to be able to track your portfolio, to be able to easily see for your portfolio what the valuation is. So I'd say kind of like in version 1, we definitely have a bunch of base functionality. I'd say the thing that I think we excel at is just making things easy to use, and making it intuitive. So that's probably a dimension that we've already exceeded on or improved on versus these some of these other competitors they mentioned. But we have kind of like we have a lot of functionality coming down the line. This is our kind of version 1. And I think a lot of that functionality, both independently and in conjunction with everything that we offer on Koyfin, is going to really take our product to the next level. So thanks for that question, Hal. That's really important to kind of answer and articulate for our users.
Superb. We do have another one here that Rob, you're probably better placed to answer. Anonymous attendee asks, how will you model the risk and the kind of risk exhibits? Is it historical risk or using some third-party provider like Barra1?
Yeah, so I think there's a bunch of different ways to measure risk. I think the first thing is probably just being able to measure pretty kind of core values of your portfolio, like volatility, beta, kind of drawdowns over time. So the next step is to really start measuring more like factor risk, and start thinking about maybe factor exposure, and then thinking about VAR and different kind of like more complex ways to measure risk. So as with everything, we're going to start with kind of like the simple stuff, and then introduce the factor stuff, and then ultimately move into kind of like deeper workflows. And we may integrate with like Bara or another provider that will help us with really deep and really quantitative exposures, but that's not something that we plan in the near term.
Awesome. We have one here from Adrian. I want a Nancy Pelosi model portfolio. Don't we all? We would no longer have to work. Thank you.
Just
Uh,
buy a bunch of NVIDIA, and that's your portfolio.
yeah. Bob Young asks, can you add an option like a covered call? So in this version, not currently, there's not a great way to replicate that. In the future, I would say options coverage is something that Koyfin needs to think about more broadly as a platform as a whole. It's not just specific to my portfolio. So we don't support options today. It is on the roadmap, probably kind of further towards the end, because it's a big project to undertake. So whenever we have option support in Koyfin itself, it's likely we would then begin to support it in other avenues such as models, my portfolio, potentially watch this and things like that. Not related, another anonymous attendee, not related to portfolio. Would you make it possible to download the press releases into Excel or CSV? Why am I questions? These are catalysts that will influence the stock price. I don't know. Do you have any perspective on that, Rob? Downloading press releases into Excel?
I think if you could just maybe shoot us an email at help@koyfin.com and just explain your use case. But you can download. There's no easy way to bulk download, but we're just maybe trying to understand a little bit more of what you're trying to accomplish in your workflow. So that would be helpful.
Awesome. Just to repeat, that's help@koyfin.com. Any other questions? We do have a little bit of time left. Feel free to kind of fire them in. I can see a few coming in here. Faisal said, I would say downloading to Word or PDF as that can be uploaded to ChatGPT. Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, Faisal, I think we right now you could probably print your the press releases and save as PDF. So if you go to print and then save as PDF, that would work. I think ultimately we want to have like a chat tool where you can chat with press releases and transcripts and SEC filings, kind of like a Koyfin GPT, and just be able to ask questions as well. So that's something that's kind of brewing in the background and something that we've thought about. But thank you for providing context on that use case.
Ed says cost. I'm assuming you're talking about my portfolio here. I can talk about the kind of the breakdown and plans. So today with my portfolio, Plus and Pro users have full access. Free users, they're kind of they have one account, so they can't open multiple accounts, which will be one single portfolio, and that one account has the same kind of entitlements as a Plus and Pro user. They just can't open multiple. We can't really speak to the kind of roadmap, but some of the more technical things like historical transactions, performance, these will probably be Plus and Pro features. But we always plan to have a nice kind of plan there for free users to track a portfolio as well. And the cost, if you head to Koyfin pricing, you'll be able to see that the Plus plan is $39 a month. The Pro plan is $79. Faisal, we've already answered that one. Can you include? Geert says, can you include investor presentations next to transcripts? Yeah, I can maybe speak to that one. We've thought about investor presentations and then also kind of filings more broadly. It's something we definitely want to do. It's just kind of we always have to kind of prioritize things. And for the last few quarters, we've been really kind of focused on all the portfolio features we're bringing out. So these things are definitely on the roadmap. They won't be in the product next week, but they should be at some point. So we definitely want to do those. Ed says, thanks. Thank you for joining, Ed. I was just now able to join. Will there be a replay available? Yes, there will. So anyone that signed up to the webinar will get a replay of this, as well as some other context and the results of the poll that we did. So yeah, although you've joined late, you'll be able to see everything. William, is my portfolio available features in both user subscribed versions of Koyfin? Is my portfolio available featured in both user subscribed versions of Koyfin? William, if you could maybe rephrase the question. Maybe it's just too late at night for me in the UK.
It's available in the Pro and the Plus plan.
All right. Preferred stock prices are available elsewhere on the platform. Will they be added to my portfolio? And will exchange traded debt functionality be expanded, e.g. historical price charting? I could probably speak to the first bit. Rob might be better to speak to the second bit. So things like preferreds, closed-end funds, warrants, we've already kind of scoped out adding, supporting those in my portfolio. A lot of people have kind of requested that. So in the kind of near term, support will be added for preferreds, definitely in my portfolio. The second question, will exchange traded debt functionality be expanded, e.g. historical price charting? Rob?
If you sort of if you're kind of like talking about corporate bonds, then that's kind of later on our roadmap. A lot of folks want to look at fixed income, so corporate bonds, muni bonds, treasuries. It's just a totally different asset class with a lot of different nuances. So we've been it's on our to-do list, but it's not going to be in the near term, just to set expectations. But it is a pretty heavily requested feature, so we will get to it, just not in the near term.
One, we've got a couple here, might be from the same person. A standalone desktop app, is that in the works?
We're not going to create a desktop app just because we have limited resources right now, and there's a lot of functionality that you can do on the web. If you have any kind of ideas or any suggestions on why you're asking for a desktop app, that would be great if you could, again, send it to help@koyfin.com. That way we'll think about it and potentially prioritize it or think about ways of doing that in the web version.
Awesome. And then Vikram here asks, any chance my portfolio will be added to your mobile app sometime soon? Even a read-only version would be cool to see. So yeah, I think before we even launched my portfolio, we knew that people would then ask for this to be kind of compatible with mobile. If you have watched this set up on Koyfin, you'll kind of see those in mobile as well. This seems like a pretty great feature to bring over to mobile as well. I would recommend, somebody's already asked this in the mobile feedback channel in Koyfin. I would recommend going in there and upvoting it as well, and we can pester the mobile team and see if we can get this done as well. Cool. Any other questions? If not, I'm happy to kind of give people 10 minutes of their life back and we can get on. But really appreciate everyone joining us today. We had a really good kind of turnout. We really enjoy doing these every month to share what we've been up to and just get a chance to connect with you all. Doesn't seem like there are any more questions, but appreciate everyone for taking the time to chat today. You can reach out to us, help@koyfin.com. My email is connor.mcneil@koyfin.com and Rob is rob@koyfin.com. So feel free to kind of send over any questions. Yeah, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.